Hey everybody! In this video I'm going to explain how to use Photoshop. And let me first start explaining why am I using Photoshop. So Photoshop is basically the software that's being used the most at studios, game studios, animation studios, graphic design studios. So when I was younger, I wanted to be a graphic designer. And so then you use Photoshop. And later, when I started drawing, I discovered that at the big studios, they also use Photoshop to draw. So yeah, I don't want to go too much in depth about it now. So let's just start creating a file and let me explain how Photoshop works. Maybe it's useful to say this, Photoshop can be quite expensive, but you can check out the trial. And there's also a subscription on monthly basis for Adobe Photoshop. You can check out adobe.com to check it out and see what kind of options they have, and maybe you can just try it out for a trial, or student license, they also have that. So let's go to File and then New. You can also press Ctrl-N. And what I would also recommend is to learn the shortcuts of Photoshop. So here we have the new document window. And here you can see it saves your recent items. So I always just like to make something up myself, but you can also select, for example, photo or print. So for example, if you want to create a print, there are already all these presets. Web, so, and also mobile and film and video are also interested. For example, if you're going to make something, a screensaver for a phone, you can just click these ones. So let's go to recent and these preset details. So here we can start filling in the name. So let's say test and the white. So a lot of times I'd like to use something like 10,000 because for the tutorials I make, I always like to use really big canvases, but you don't have to go that big. I wouldn't go bigger than 10,000. Maybe even 5,000 is already pretty big. So let's now do 5,000. And I always like canvases that are horizontal, just like this screen. So this screen is horizontal. And then let's do a height of 25,000. We can always change this later, right? And this is set on pixels, but you can also put it on inches, centimeters, millimeters, etc. But pixels are the dots on your screen. Then go to resolution. And I think for screens, it's 72. And I like to make my drawings on 300, so it's also suitable for print. But if you only want to make things for digital, you can use 72. But I like to use 300 because that's what's used for print. Yeah, besides that, yeah, I explained that pixels are the dots on your screen. So if you really look closely at your screen, you can see those dots, depending also on the resolution of your screen. So let's see. Yeah, basically, I don't really use these kinds of options that much. I'm all fine with this. So let's press create. And now we created our canvas. And let's start by explaining a little bit about Photoshop some more. So maybe first I want to tell, if you want to know some shortcuts, you can press F1, or you can go to here, help, and press and go to Photoshop help. And there everything is explained basically. So if you want to figure out something or something went too fast in this video, I would recommend check out their help page. So there's also Photoshop made also tutorials themselves. So check them out if you want to learn more about Photoshop. So I would really recommend checking out these different things. So let's go to File, and then go to where was that? On Preferences. So it's, oh yeah, here, I think it's in, yeah, it's in Edit. Let's go to Edit and go to Preferences, General. So it opens in my second screen, but now here it is. So here you can set up all the preferences of Photoshop. So general, color picker, dope. So you can change the icon. So I don't really mess around with these things. So maybe it's interesting here to yeah, if there's something wrong with your Photoshop or something you don't like, a lot of times you can change stuff. For example, a beep went on when that Photoshop makes a sound when something's wrong, etc. Interface. So here we can select the color theme. And I like to use this dark. I think this is a little bit too dark, but maybe also cool. Maybe this would be even more interesting for my videos because there's more contrast. And you can also use white, but it's way too light. I actually like this one. This looks slick, etc. The older Photoshop used this setup, and I don't know, it looks so grayish. Highlight color. You can change that as well. For example, you see that around here. Oh, let's do default. So here you can see it. Now this one here, this in the layers, you can see that this blue. And when I do default, it's gray. So let's do blue or maybe default. I think let's just keep that using that. Yeah, and here you can do things like I think this was the. I think we should see this now. I don't know why I'm not seeing this now. Let's put them all off. That's weird. Let's put that here. But here you can change the shadows under the screens, etc. So yeah, basically not that too important. Workspace again. Yeah, actually, I'm not using these kinds of options more. But if you want to find out some things are weird, you can check it out. For example, this is something I do use, animated zoom. So can I? Yeah. So for example, can you see that it's animated this? And if I put it off, it doesn't save it automatically. Yeah, it doesn't animate. But I actually like it. When you have a slower computer, it could be useful to turn off those things that makes your, yeah, it makes everything quicker. So, and there are also some other things. For example, if you want to zoom with your scroll wheel, could be history log, file handling. Also not using that too much. Let me see. Yeah, I think this is way more important for if you're really working for print, etc. Here, actually, basically, I'm not using these things a lot as well. Performance, this is something that could be useful. For example, here is my computer. I have a lot of available RAM, 30,000 MB. But here you can change how much you want. For example, if you have a slow computer and you know that you can bump this a bit up. So Photoshop uses a lot of RAM. So I always like to have a PC with a lot of RAM in it. So RAM is the memory that it's don't know if I can explain this correctly, but if you're drawing, etc., it stores things in that RAM, in that memory. So it's really important for drawing and for using big files as well. So graphics process setting, I have this on, so you can use your graphic card for processing Photoshop. So yeah, so check if that's on, because that's useful. And but I think this is standard. It's all fine. So this also in history and Cage. If you have a slow computer and you don't have a lot of memory, you can lower the history states. I have done 100. I like that. So I like to use 100, maybe even more. But that's the history states is the steps you can take back in a drawing. I will show that more later in this video. But if your computer is slow, maybe put it to 20, but then you can't go back that much. Scratch disk. Using the disk you can use. So I have this disk is a flash drive, so it's quicker. And this one is traditional one. It's more my backup. So I use this one because that one is fastest. Cursors, you can change the type of cursors. You can also use you can also use buttons on your keyboard to change that. Transparency and gamut, so you can also change these things. And to be honest, it's really funny to watch these things one by one, because now I see, oh, I can really change all these things. And I actually knew that, but I never used these kinds of options. But it's useful to at least know it a little bit. Units and rulers, pixel points, pixels inch, screen resolutions. I said it right. The screen resolution is 72 pixels per inch. Guides, these are the guides things are using. So this is, for example, if you're using the transform tools, the colors and stuff, so you can also change that however you like. So I'm not really into customizing stuff too much, but yeah, you can really change a lot. So plugins, type, 3D, technology, product improvement. Yeah, here all these things I don't really use. So I think that's it with preferences. So let me see, where are we going to start? Explained already about checking out the help. And yeah, let's go back to the canvas. So this is our canvas. This is where we're going to draw on. And here are already some tools you can see. And that is depending on the tool you use. These things change up there. And this is the toolbar. And here are basically all the tools we're going to use. So this is my brush panel. These are my colors. And here are my layers. And this is my work setup I like to use. But you can actually change that. So for example, if we go to Window and we go to Workspace, you see Mitch. So I created my own workspace. And so I think I can also create a new workspace. So if we click that, new workspace, you get this. And let's say new workspace test, or however you like. So let's do save. So if we now go new workspace test, I think now we can switch between those workspaces. So I think let's open actions here. So this is different. So if we go to Mitch, that one changes. And if I go to, it's back again. So it's really interesting to create different workspaces. I think when you start, oh yeah, I'm using different different monitors. So sometimes some things get on my second monitor. That's really annoying. But here you can see that you have all these different things. So let's go to workspace mids. And yeah, here you can see I just keep things really basic. Here on window, you can, let's see that arrange. I actually never really use this that much. So what does it now? It doesn't even do that much at the moment. I think it's for when you have things up. So actually, I'm never using this, but what I also recommend is just try stuff out. That's also how I learned all these things. Extensions, yeah, could be interesting, but I never used it. It says Adobe Color Team, so that could be actually quite interesting. Let's see, 3D, not using that much. Actions, I do use, going to explain a bit later about it. Put it off. Adjustments, what was that? So here, no, actually, oh, that's color color things. We're going to talk about it soon, but I'm using that quite differently actually. Brushes, these things you can already see. I made this thing, so you can always drag and combine these things in these windows. So it's also useful. You see, and you can crop it up like this. Brushes, channels. For example, here we have RGB, red, green, blue, if I correct. Yeah, correct. So, for example, if you're making, if you have a photo, you can turn off, you can watch those different channels. So actually not using that much, but sometimes, for example, when you have a drawing and it looks weird, there are weird colors. You can check out the colors if that's correct. So clips, what is that? I think it's symbols, it's type. Yeah, never used it. Maybe I always use a different app. I worked at a game company and I had to make fonts sometimes, and I used always an app for that. Histogram, going to talk about it later. History, that's interesting. So here, for example, that was what I was talking about. So if you're going to paint, you can see it creates these histories. So, and do you remember in the previous instance, I set it up to 100 and you go then here back to new. Oh, you see? And then, so you can go back and forth in time. So that's useful. Learn. I think this is probably new, but it's this interesting for us. So if you want to get learn directly from Photoshop, check this out. So Photoshop is a great site, so that's really useful. So libraries. So yeah, that is, I think this has to do with the cloud of Photoshop and Adobe. I actually don't use it, but it could be interesting. They also have a lot of stock things. So maybe if you look for stock photos, they also have a lot of stuff. Where were we? Gradients, histogram, history, info, layer comps. Maybe I can tell a bit about it later, but this sometimes I use for presentations and storyboards. Let's go learn libraries, measurement log. Actually never used it. So I actually don't know what it is, but again, yeah, there's a lot of stuff in Photoshop. So let's remove this. So you can always remove it by dragging it and pressing the cross. So that's always how I fix my stuff. Modifier keys, let's see you there. Where is the modifier keys? I don't even see it pop up. Oh, well, also not using that. Navigator could be interesting. So this is our navigator, and you basically see, if I draw something here on the canvas, you see it on the navigator. So you can use it when you're really zoomed in on your drawing, you can use the navigator to get a preview. For example, if I'm really into a drawing like this, you can use the navigator also to go around like this. So that could be really useful when you're painting. Again, I'm not using that too much. I'm using something different that will show in a bit. But yeah, a while ago I did use that. So you can also use it on your second screen and make it even bigger. So it is actually quite interesting. So let's remove this dot again. Let's make it smaller and close it. So let's go to window again. Learn, measurement, navigator, notes. I think I actually never, oh yeah, you can use notes in your files. I think it's something that yeah, graphic designers often use. So when you see somewhere on your screen a little note symbol and you can't get it off, open the note window like this. But again, not using that stuff. Paragraph is for typing. Could be useful. Sometimes you want to type in some stuff. I mean, here. Actually, maybe I can show it a little bit here. For example, this is the type tool. And you select where you want to type. I think it's, yeah, lorem ipsum. Why is it black? So yeah, now it's black. So with the paragraph, you can change things. Maybe you worked in Word or any other text program, but you can change all these different things, or the character like this. So actually, when I started out as a graphic designer, I had to work a lot with these kinds of different things. So it could be useful when you, when you start your career and maybe you become first a graphic designer or UI artist. Let's see, paragraph styles. So not interesting. Let's delete this layer. And paragraph style, pads. So this is for when we're going to work with vectors. I will show that in a little bit. Again, not using that too much. But most of the time you're working in Photoshop with pixels, but you can also work in vectors. Shapes, properties. Let's see properties. So here you see the document info. Yeah, it just says how big it is. RGB, etc. Rule on grids. So actually didn't see this in a while, but could be interesting. This is maybe interesting. Here you can see the different colors and where your cursor is. So could be interesting. Could be useful. Again, I think it's more useful for graphic designers. Shapes, styles. Let's see, what was it again? See, what is this actually? So again, here you can, oh yeah, this is something, I will show that in a little bit, but if you like this here, and you can save these, you can add these things on top of it. And I will show that maybe a bit later. Swatches. So here, this is actually useful if you're making a painting and want to use certain colors. But again, I'm not using that much, but if you're really into working organized, you can definitely use. And that's basically, again, how I also learned all these different things is by just pressing all these buttons and play around. And when you think you mess something up, you can always go to workspace and go for the default again and change it and save it again. But this is, here you can create your GIFs and animations. And when I was making banners as a graphic designer, I had to make banners with this as well. So here you can make an animations with. It's super limited, and I wouldn't advise to use Photoshop to animate, but you could with this. So let's turn this off, and swatches, timeline, two presets. So I think, yeah, it's also not that interesting. So those are the basic windows. And let's go a bit more into depth about the different tools now. So this is the Move tool. And what it does is when we go to the layers, and again, let me first explain something about layers. So this is our layer panel. And you can see there's one layer now selected. It's the background. You can press this icon to make a new layer, or you can press Control-N of I actually don't know the new layer shortcut out of my head. Maybe if no, sometimes I think maybe that used to be when you hovered over it, you would see the shortcut. But here now we created a layer we can turn on and off, and we can also turn those background now on and off. I think if I delete this one, you can't. But if you make a new layer on top of it, you can. So here we have a new layer, and we can draw on this layer like this. And we can turn that one on and off. We can also create a new layer here and control on top of that. And if you don't like it, you can turn on and off. So this is the Move tool, and you can select it by press V, and now we can move it around. So here we have all these options, and select auto select. So when I now click on this black one, it selects that one. See, watch these layers. I click on the green one and selects that one, click on the black one and selects that. So you can use it. So now when you click somewhere, it selects that layer. So I personally don't like it to use it that way. So I turn off that auto select. And when I want to use this, I press Control and click the object I want to draw. And this is actually why I usually don't name my layers, because I can just select the layer I want to use. Yeah, one other thing, probably if you're looking at your layers, it looks a little bit different. So let's see how that goes. Panel options. Yeah, go to here. Go to this icon and go to panel options, click it, and you get this thing. So thumbnail size, you can go for small, big. Here, small. It's a shame that you can't see it live happening here, but usually it's selected on entire document. What does it mean is here, for example, you see now all this space around this. So when I make a new layer, you can see here the entire document in this thumbnail. And when I make a dot, you can see this small dot. Maybe you can even see it on your screen. Here, you can see it here. You see all the space around. So when I go to those panel options and I click it, and I go to layer bounds, you can clearly see the object, and I like to use it that way. Yeah, you can change the size as well as the thumbnail. I like to use these smaller ones, but yeah, do whatever you like. So let's see what, there are also more layers. Oh, here, new layer. So again, here you can see those shortcuts, right? It's when you, it's a lot of times besides the thing. So Shift, Control N. When you press Shift, Control N, it opens this one. So now we can create a new layer. So it created a new layer. So if you want, you can name them all, but I just like to press this button actually, like this. What you can also do, what's interesting is when we drag this layer and we release it on this new layer button, it creates a copy. So that's interesting. I think you can also go to right click and go to duplicate layer and do this, and then it opens there. So again, duplicate layer as, and then you can give it a name, and here it says destination document. So here's the test. So now if I press OK, it will appear here. But what you can also do is a new, and now you can create a new, so new paint. So we can press OK. And now it opens here. So now we exported this layer to this file, to this here. And sometimes that can be really, really useful. So save it. Nope. Is there some more things I already want to explain here? Delete layer, quick export, not using that. Group. That's interesting. So sometimes it's useful to get all these things into a folder. So you can click this one and then press Shift. So you select all these layers. You can press this icon and then it throws into a group. Group 1, or you can say add another name. You just click on there. So Control Z, now we're going back in time. We'll explain a little bit more about it later. Or maybe it's useful to talk about that now. So sometimes when I make a drawing, something like this here, I press Control Z. So I go back in that history, what I was telling about, right? And you can also press Control Shift Z to go forward in time. So and you can see that here, undo and redo. So go to edit if you lose that, undo brush tool, redo, and it's also it also works for those file things. So but what I want to show is Shift, select all these layers and press Ctrl G, and now you also put it in a folder instead of you on pressing this button. Ctrl G is shortcut for those things. You can also use Ctrl and press and hold Ctrl and click on the layers you want to get in a folder. So now these are in a folder and these not. So that could also be useful. So let's see. So we've made all these groups. So this also collapse all folders. So if you make different folders like this, and you have a lot of stuff, like let's create some, let's make a folder here and press this. Collapse all groups. They're all closed now. And I think they also would say, isn't there a button for open all groups? Oh, that's funny. That's not saying that, but you can also open it again with this here. You can also drag and drop folders here into this. So it could also be useful, like this here. Actually, let's delete all this stuff. You can press delete, or you can press this bin like this here. So what I'm also sometimes doing, so when I've made a drawing, I drag and drop it on new, and then it also duplicates like this here. But you can also select all these three and drag and drop it in this folder, and then it gets into a folder. Or you can throw it away by dragging it to the bin. Simply as that. Some more things. Artboards, not using that much. Blending option, create clipping mask. That's something interesting. Let's see, let's make this thing. So here we've created this. And here, this is this FX. And we can do, let's do that. So blending options. That opens this screen. And now you can add a bevel and emboss. So here you can see that it creates this line around it, and then we can go, you can change stuff like this here. So I would advise to just play around with this. So here change, you can select and change all these different options. Shading could be, it could be useful sometimes. I'm not using that much anymore. It's more that I'm using when I'm using it sometimes when I have to design something. Stroke, you can use the stroke here. This is could be useful. And then press outside. It has a stroke now outside it. Opacity, inner shadow. Yeah, I think it's not too interesting to explain them all, but what I would advise, for example, drop shadow could be really, this is something I fairly use sometimes. Here, you can use this to create a drop shadow. I would advise not to use this too much, but it's interesting. When you press OK, you see it has here. So for example, if we make a new layer, it's here. And here you can see that it has this, this thing. You can open it, and then you can turn off the effects on and off. You can also drag this effect and press it here. You can also drag and I think was it Control, Shift, Alt? Yeah, Alt. When you press Alt and you drag and drop it on the layer, you duplicate that effect, place it somewhere else. So that could be interesting. What you can also do is fill on 0%, and now you don't see that green anymore, but you do see that effect. And that's also what I haven't thought about it yet. Here we have this opacity. You can turn this lighter, right? And then it also brings that part, but you can play around with that fill and etc. So let's delete these effects. So you can drag those effects away like this here to the bin, then they're gone. Yeah, maybe we can. Oh, we were talking about the this move tool. So, oh yeah, that's out select. You can also select it on layer groups. So that could be interesting. So you can select groups, but I have this always on layers. But these groups, you can then that it only selects those folders. Again, I think it's useful for when you're having lots of files. So here, this is also interesting. I think wasn't there align things? No, I don't think so. But here we have this move these icons. So if you make different layers, like this here, and we select those layers, we can use this. So this, you can use this to align these things on one side. You see? Again, I think it's more useful when you're doing graphic design. But here with these tools, you can align these different layers. You need to select the layers you want to use. You can also do it with 2 layers, for example, here, etc. But that's also something I like to use in a while. So the select tool is of course super important. So if you make a painting or something, you can select something and then move it. So the select tool is when you press N, and you can drag and place it everywhere you want. You can also here, when you press this one, you can select different things like this here. So you can select multiple spaces, but when you don't like a part, you can deselect a part. And here you see, and you also have shortcuts for these tools, and that's how I basically use that. For example, if here it is normal, if I now select something like this here, it disregards all these other selections. Ctrl Z to go back. But if I want to make an extra space, you press Shift and you do this. Or you can press Alt to make this area inside this here. What does this thing do actually? Well, this is also interesting. I actually never use it, but it could be really interesting if you now you select this space in it. So I would recommend to play around with it. Feather, for example, that's also interesting. Let's do the normal selection tool and let's press 25 pixels. Let's see how that works. So now you can see it has this feather effect. So it has this transparent space. And now let's take a different color here. So you can see through that part. Let's see. So here we have these things. Fixed ratio. Yeah, it stays fixed, so that's pretty normal. So here we have the lasso tool. So, and you can, and this is something I use for painting. So make a new layer, and here you can draw the selection. And this, when I have a sketch, you see me doing this a lot. You probably have seen me doing this a lot. I make the layer, so something like this, and then I fill it with color with the bucket tool, pressing G. So now I have this layer selected. So maybe now I can also tell a bit about painting in. So what I do is, for example, when I draw something like this, with the L, I make these selections like this. Here I have these eyes. When I want to paint something in it, I press this icon in Photoshop. So here, lock in the layers, press the lock, and now we can start painting in here, the shadows here. And also painting this one here, like this here. And maybe making some highlights. Like this here. So now telling something more, but I wanted to tell us that you can press this icon to paint within a shape. If I turn it off and I go paint, it paints outside. So that's really useful for when working with these things. So that's basically how I use that lasso tool. Actually, I maybe want to show it. So when I, for example, if I'm going to draw a character, when I have the sketch, something like this here, and I'm going to paint under it, I create a layer, and I use this lasso tool to draw on it. So here, and when I don't like the tools, when I press Alt, and I deselect these parts, right? So you can also zoom in, like this here. And here. And when I, for example, I want to have this ear in the same layer, I press Shift, and then you can add a part. And then it's added. What you can also do is think what was, oh yeah, press Shift and then Alt. And now here, can you see it? Now I'm not drawing anymore, but now I'm selecting these parts. Now you have these hard edges. Sometimes I press this Shift Alt in, and then when you just drag, you can start drawing again. So that's maybe interesting. Shift Alt. Oh, you can always go Control Z, these selections. So I'm drawing a part and then press Alt. Then drawing a bit of these hard edges, and maybe now I want to continue drawing like this. And then I'm going to release my pen from the screen, and I can use this again. And when I'm dragging again, I can still drawing like this here. So also make sure this point opens, and this one, you close it like this. And we can give it a color. I press G and change the color a little bit here. And fill it with a color like this one here. And then we've made it. And then I will add a layer on top, for example. But I will show that a little bit more, or you can watch my painting videos if you want to see more about that. The magic wand is also something I sometimes use. For example, if you have the layer selected, you can press the magic wand, and then it selects that color. So it could be useful, for example, when I have this here, a color here, press this color here, and yeah, then you can select these colors. You can also do, I think, thought you can sample all layers. So now you can, here you can see you can use all these different layers. Maybe we can turn off the line art. You see now, even though they are on different layers, you can select these parts on and off. But again, I'm not using that much. You can change the tolerance. That means that the range of colors it's selecting. So the crop tool is also really interesting. Oh, this is interesting. I never found out about. So we have this selection, and I click this crop tool, and what it does, when I now press enter, you can see it's cropped out the whole image. So everything is smaller again. And when I want to have it bigger again, I click again with this crop tool, zoom out, and I can change that. That whole canvas again. So here, and now it's big again, but all these things around it are deleted. But it's really interesting that you can select an item, and I select an item here by pressing Control and clicking on this thumbnail. You can select what's on those layers. Also here with this one, so Control click like that. So your frame tool, actually never used that. The color picker, so you can select the color you want to use. So something like this here. So let's look at colors now. So here we can select the color you want to use, and you see it here. But let's talk about that colors now for a bit. So here we see the color tools, and the H stands for hue. So, and that means the color. And you can see it's 360 degrees. You can also see this as a circle. So here, this color looks closely at this red. So it's basically a circle that goes around. You also have sometimes in some apps you have a color wheel, and I actually like that more because you can use that for color combinations really well. But not talking about that now. Saturation, the S. So that is the intensity of a color, and B is brightness. So this is 0% brightness, so that's super dark. 100% is super bright. For example, if you have this white color, it's at 100%, it's super white, and then it's every color with a brightness of 0 is black. You probably, if you open up Photoshop for the first time, you wouldn't see these settings. You would see probably something like, I think, RGB, and like this, or you would see schmick. So RGB is for what the screen exists of. So our screen exists of red, green, and blue subpixels. And when you combine those, you get different colors. So you can, yeah, it's like with painting, you can merge these colors. With printing, you're using SMIC. So cyan, magenta, yellow, and yeah, black. I don't know why it's called key. So again, actually see color wheel, and this is useful because, yeah, I heard about it, that it's now in Photoshop, but I never realized. So this is really cool because now you can use, for example, this yellow here. Here you can select the hue, the different colors. So here you can pick what color you want. You can also use it this light, and then you can hear the saturation. So we can put the saturation 100, and then we have this blackness here. So you can select your color. So check out my painting tutorials if you want to know more about it, because this is really useful because I like to work with color schemes. For example, here this yellow. Oh, it's white now. So here we have this this greenish yellow. Let's make it more like this here. And I want to use this complementary color, that blue. So here, so this creates this color scheme. So not going too much in depth about it, but this a lot of times how I create my let my colors fit to each other, and a color wheel is a great tool for that. So I actually think I'm going to leave it on this. You can also use here this block, but I actually like this color wheel way more. So check out these different things you could use. And now let's move on to the next one, stamp. I think you can use this one. Oh yeah, this is really neat. What you can do now, bigger, and with this you can say, so we have the stamp tool, and I now press this here, and if you're going to paint here, why isn't it working? Maybe because it's a different layer. Yeah, you can see it's going to there. So maybe if I all layers, press this on all layers, I go to this layer and I press Alt and I click here. It takes that point, and if I'm going, you can already see this preview. If I'm going to paint here, you can see it turning up like this here. So you can, and sometimes with painting, this is really useful. I actually don't use it that much, but I know illustrators that use it a lot. So again, if you press and hold it, you can see these different, these different tools. So let's see. It's going to talk. We didn't really talk about the brush tool. I think we were at the pipette thing. So if you have this layer, then you can choose these colors with it. So I actually never click this icon. What I do is when I'm painting, I press Alt, and then I select the color, for example, white, etc. So now let's go to the brush layers and make a new layer. So yeah, basically we have all these different brushes. So when you select this brush, you want to have this brush settings icon. So we can go here. We have the brush settings and brushes. Let's open that one as well. Let's move it here, this here. So here we see the brush settings. So we now have this brush. I actually just want a round brush. So select this symbol here. So we now have this brush here. Let's create a sketch brush because this is already pressure sensitive. Let's actually turn this off. So when you have a basic brush, it just shows this when you're painting. But when you press shape dynamics on, get a brush like this. It's pressure sensitive, right? When you select this option, you get all these different options. So here, why it has that, when I turn it off, you don't have it anymore, but you can press this pressure, it's turned on. So when you don't see this pressure sensitive, check if this is turned on. It's on shape dynamics. You can change here this medium dynamometer. So if I press it on 50%, you get this. Put it on 0, get this. And if I press it on 100, you don't see that difference. So I normally have it on 0%. You can play around with these different options to get these weird brushes. I would recommend to play around with it, and you can always change it back to some basics. Here you can change the size. You can also use on your keyboard. There are these tools, those bracket tools on your keyboard to change the size of the brushes. This is interesting because here, this perfectly round brush, right? We can change this. We can make a marker out of it. So make this narrow. Here you can see it. We've now created this marker out of it. We can change it back, or we can also change the angle and make it bigger again. Hardness, and that's what I use for painting. So now let's actually start with making this ball. Fill it. So here. Now press this icon. Press this icon. So we're now going to paint inside this, or actually maybe not yet. Here we have this hardness, press it on 0. And you can already see when I'm making a new layer, it has this soft edges, and that's what I'm using for painting. But what I don't like when I'm painting these sharp edges, right? So I turn off the shape dynamics. So now it's a brush like this. What I then do is I go to transfer. When I turn that off, you already see it changing. So you now get this. When I press softly, you get this color. So that's how I actually use it for painting. So I press it's on 0%. And then I select this layer and I can use it to paint. So when I click this icon, pick darker color, I can start painting inside this ball. And that's basically my paintbrush, just using this basic brush. And here you have all these different brushes you can create your own weird brushes, for example, wet edges, etc. And here, these are actually the brushes I use to painting. And I save them here. So here, this is my brushes library. And here you can see that I've saved all these different brushes with different settings. And this is really interesting because we can make a new one. For example, let's make one with a dual brush, texture, scattering. Let's use a spacing like this here, and you get this really weird brush like this here. And we can press this button like this here, and we can call it weird brush. And you can say include color. And when you do that, then it gets green. But I don't want to include color. I just want it to be the color I'm using at that time. So then press OK. And now you see it's added in my brushes like this here. That's also interesting. Let's all these different layers. And again, I want to delete it. So here. So these are the brushes I use, and you can import those brushes by clicking this one, import brushes, and then it opens Photoshop. Then you can import different library brushes people made. You can also, because I get a lot of questions about brushes and stuff, and you get in Photoshop, you can get an insane amount of free brushes, and you can check it out by get more brushes. So press this button and go to get more brushes if you're wanted. So here now you can go to new brush preset. That's what I did for the new, what I just showed. Brush group, that is this, for example. So you create a new folder where you can store brushes in it. But basically, these are all the brushes I usually use. A different brush I like to use is the, how's it called? It's a brush I use for drawing perspective. So maybe, or I will talk about it maybe later, but maybe I can show a brush, how to create a brush for drawing hair. So let's actually create these things. So these dots, and I want to use this for drawing and making a hairbrush. Go to this layer and then left click and then create, I think duplicate layer. Yeah, duplicate layer and go to new hairbrush. Now we have it here, and control click on this thumbnail to get this selected. Go to image, crop, and now we have this thing selected. And we can create image edit. Where's it now? Was it this? A little bit lost now, but let's change. Yeah. So edit. Again, not using it that much. Define pattern. Click that. And we call, oh, should be a brush. It's not better. Define brush preset. So here we have this. And we call this brush one test. Okay. So here you can see it now turned up here. So let's go to the different layer. And we have now selected this brush. And it's also appeared here. So we now have this. You can paint hair with this, right? It's not really perfect yet. The spacing is a bit off. So is this better? Yeah, this is off the spacing. So if we put the spacing like this, you have dots. Could also be interesting when you're drawing a field with flowers, for example, you could use this. But when I'm pressing the spacing on 0, we can have this hairbrush. And you can also press shape dynamics, pen pressure. You get it like this here, etc. I actually don't like it there. You can use transfer. Maybe that's interesting. And when you're satisfied with your brush, you can press this button and you could include the color. And then let's call it hairbrush. this. And now we can actually, have this hairbrush, and we can drag and drop it here. And you can also use this to create brushes with textures, etc. I would say play around with that to find your ideal brush. Oh, that's also something I have to paint. But when I draw something and then you press spacebar, you can move around your canvas. That's this hand tool. Maybe I can already tell something about zooming. So here is the zoom tool. You can press spacebar control to zoom in, and when you hold control, spacebar and alt, you zoom out. But that is how I use my brushes and playing around with those things. Let's go to the brush tool. So that is basically the same as a regular brush, but then you're deleting stuff. So, and you can also the same settings as a brush. You can also save that here. Eraser. Oh, and then we have created this eraser brush. And then we have the paint bucket tool. And you can use that to fill in the color. You can press G. You can also make a selection and press G, etc. So then we have the smudge tool. When you have, for example, you have this brush and this here, and we select this smudge, you can merge these things together. And there are also some more tools about that. Let's see here it is. This pen tool, you can create it to vectors like this. And with vectors is different. Vectors are some calculations or some things. So like this, and you see that shape here. And I'm actually not using it that much. Where's the point tool? Oh, here, this one. If you select this direct select tool, you can select these points and use that here. And you could use that for some things. You can also use create. You can actually, for example, if I would say rasterize layer, so now it's a vector, I press this, it's now a bitmap, so now it's not anymore a vector, but you can create shapes and stuff. It's, again, not using it that much, but it's useful to know what it is. I think we can also see if we go to shapes here, or was it? Paths. For example, if I create this, you can see it also appears up here. So, and then you can save those things and more, but I'm not using it that much there. Here, delete it. The text tool, already talked about. The line tool is interesting because I'm using that for perspective. For example, you can create these lines. What I did, you can also use it on shape again. Then it has this vector. I'm not using it that way. I'm using it on setting on pixels. Then I use it for setting up perspective, like this here. And here you have all these different options, the opacity, etc. Again, I would recommend to play around with it. So there's still a couple of more things I want to talk about. What's happening? So let's select this. Oh, the selection tools, the feather is still on. Put this on 0, so it's square again. Yeah, maybe some quick things about painting. So I click this cal brush I downloaded from the brushes from Photoshop, from Get More Brushes. You can download those cal brushes. Those are really cool. So let's make this bigger. Oh, it's a wet blender brush. So actually, let's use my own basic brushes. So here we have this. And what's interesting is, let's pick this purple color. Let's draw it on top of here. And when you can press this, this normally on normal, you can also use it on multiply. So it's get a darker tone there. So you can play around with that. You can also put it on overlay. I don't want to go too much in depth about that. You can watch my painting videos to see how I use this to paint. But it's really interesting to play around with these settings. So what I sometimes also like to use, for example, if I'm drawing a character. So here we have a character, head, arms. And I want to use this as a mask. I create a new layer, and you can create clipping mask. And pick a different color. And now we can draw inside this color. So like this. And now we've created a mask like this here. And you can, I think you can just, you can also drag it, and now it's separated again. You can also create a new one. And then you can say create clipping mask. And then you, for example, you can create something like this here. So here. So you can stack these ones up to create your masks. But actually, that's not the type of mask I use most of the time. For example, if we have this, and we create Control click, and I press this button, I've created a mask here. But let's put this in a folder, and we have this selection, and put it on the folder. Click this icon. Now we've created a folder, and everything inside this folder stays inside this here. So like this here. Like here. But we can also, if you invert those colors, Control I, you can see changes. So you change the mask. You can also select here. And when I have this selected, you can see you can only choose black and white or gray. So you can start painting some, you can change the mask. So that's how I usually change the mask. So you can also use a gray in a mask, then it's transparent, as you can see. For example, you see that here. But you can use, you can create your mask with that. Again, see my painting tutorials to see more information about those things. So some things, maybe one thing I still want to talk about that is, for example, if I paint this here, let's make it a little bit clearer. Let's draw in a head. Sometimes I like to mirror my drawings, and I do that with F2, but I created that myself. You can go to edit, transform, and then you can say, these are all really interesting. Flip horizontal. So flip horizontal, you change the head to the other side, like this here. What I did is go to Windows and then go to Actions. I created my own action for that. So when I press F2, it does that for me. Instead of going to these options and selecting that. So you can, so what I did is I created this action. So flip current layer, axis horizontal. So when, for example, do it again, I can actually delete this one. Oh, no, I want to stop this. So here I'm going to delete this one. Flip. Let's make a new one. So create layer and then click this icon. And then you can call this flip. Function key F2. This is all fine. And let's press record. So it's going to record the things I'm going to do now. Okay. And that edit. Then it goes to transform, flip horizontal. Said it couldn't do it, so let's stop it for now. I need to draw something here. So something here. Press again. Oh no, select this one and then press this button. So now we're going to record and edit, transform, flip horizontal. And now you see it there. And now we pause. And now we've made this flip. And when I press F2, you can see it flips. And you can create a whole different things. For example, you can also do it if this is your favorite brush. You select this brush, or no, let's have this one selected. Let's do this, and let's do favorite brush. Function key F3, record. Okay, and select the brush you want to use. And press here. So now, when I'm erasing and I want to use my favorite brush again, I press F3, and you can use, and you have the brush selected you like so much. So that's interesting. Maybe some more interesting thing is the transform tool. For example, yeah, Control T, you already have this transform tool like this. When I press Control, you can transform it like this. So play around with the transform tool, and you can find it by Control T, or you can go to Edit, Transform. You can use warp, scale, skew, distort, perspective. Yeah, you can use these things for all these different things. For example, here, like this. So I would say play around with those types of things. Here you can also see it here. You also have these kinds of different options. So you have all these different, I would say play around with those, because that's also fairly useful. So let's see. Here we haven't even talked about this image mode. You can use these different options like RGB. So this is for, then you go to don't flatten, or else it would merge all these layers. So you can change the color settings of your image. I usually have it on RGB. Don't flatten. You can change the image size. So that means if you think it's too big, you can change it to 200, for example, but then it of course gets really pixelated. Canvas size. So I already showed the canvas tool, right? This one. You can also use the canvas size. So when you say, I want to have this 750 pixels wide, you can do this. And here you can say, should it move outside of the middle or the sides? So you can play around with that. You can also say, do relative. And now when you press that, you can say, I want to add it 20 pixels wider, 50 pixels height. You can also do that when you press OK. So now it moves out of the center, but you can also use it one of these sides, like this here. Image rotation could also be interesting. You can also create an action for that, but then you can rotate the canvas. And I would say play around with these different options. That, I think I've basically covered all the main things I'm using. If you have any question, let me know. Drop them in the comments, and maybe in the future can make a different video. Maybe it goes to a bit more in depth about something. Let's show a bit the export option. So what I usually do is when I save something, I press File, Save As, and I use that to select these things. And here you can use the different options you want to use something. For example, most of the time I'm using Photoshop, PSD, so that's the Photoshop type of folder. You can also use that in Procreate, etc. A lot of times I'm also using JPEGs or PNG. So these are the different types, and you can basically save it, save all these things. So I hope you like this video. It's useful. Let me know if you have any comments. Maybe and if there are a lot of questions, I can create a new video where I go in depth about some different things, because Photoshop is a really big software and you can do a lot of things and it can be overwhelming, but take your time. Maybe you can check out the Photoshop tutorials for some more help. And that's it. Thanks, everyone.